The night I rode into Hollow Spring, I had $90,000 in cattle scattered across 3 counties, and not a soul on earth who'd have wept if I'd frozen to death in that storm. I knew it too. That was the kind of man I'd made of myself by 41, and I'd been proud of it the way a man is proud of a scar he earned doing something foolish. The blizzard came down off the Monroe Divide like the sky had been waiting all year to do it. 1 hour there was a hard gray light on the flats and a wind that smelled of snow. The next there was no light at all, no road, no up nor down, just white screaming sideways and my horse Cobb dropping his head and quitting on me a mile from anything. I'd ridden plain that whole month on purpose. No drovers, no foreman, a borrowed name and a coat with the elbows gone, because the only way to learn what a country was really made of was to ride through it looking like a man it could afford to be cruel to. I'd learned plenty. I'd learned that the town of Monroe would let a tramp sleep in the cold and charge him for the privilege of the livery floor. I had not learned one single thing that warmed me. Then there was a light. It came and went in the white, low and yellow and stubborn, and Cobb saw it before I did and walked toward it on his own, and I let him. It was a lamp in a window, and the window was in a long low building with a sod-banked wall and a leaning barn behind it, and a board over the door I couldn't read for the snow caked on it. A waystation. The old kind from before the freight road moved, a place where the stages used to change teams and travelers used to eat. I'd passed 100 of them gone to ruin. This one had a light. I got down and near fell down, my legs being more idea than fact by then, and I beat on the door with a fist I couldn't feel. It opened fast, like she'd been standing right behind it. A young woman, a lamp in her hand, her other hand already reaching for my sleeve to haul me in out of the wind, and she didn't ask me a single question first. That's the thing I remember clearest of all the years. She didn't ask was I able to pay, or where I was bound, or what kind of man comes knocking in a blizzard. She got a hand in my coat and pulled, and she said, come in, get the door, get it shut." And then I was inside, and the wind was a roar on the other side of the wood, and I was standing dripping on her floor. "My horse," I said. It was about all I had. "The barn's round the back, there's a stall and there's hay. Davy," she turned, and there was a boy, maybe 6, tow-headed, staring at me from beside the stove with eyes as round as the lamp. "Davy, you stay. I'll take the gentleman's horse." "You'll do no such thing," I said. "It's my horse." And I went back out into it, and she came anyway, wrapping a shawl over her head, and between us we got Cobb into a dry stall and rubbed down and fed, and I saw by the lantern that the barn was near empty, 2 milk cows, a sway-backed mule, a deal of cobweb where horses used to stand. A station with no traffic. I should have wondered at it then. I was too cold to wonder at anything, but the heat I could see leaking yellow from under the house door. Inside she set me by the stove, and the boy moved over without being told, and she put a blanket round my shoulders that I could feel had come off her own bed. It was that thin and that warm through. She was thin herself, I saw now, the kind of thin that isn't natural to a young face, with her sleeves pushed up and her hands red and cracked from work and weather. Pretty under it, the way a thing is pretty when you can see what it's costing to keep standing. Black hair come loose, a patched apron. A wedding band gone loose on the finger. "You'll be hungry," she said, not a question. "I'll pay for whatever you can spare," I said. "I've got money." I had a few coins in my pocket, plain ones I carried for the part I was playing, and a hidden belt under my shirt I'd have sooner died than show a stranger. "Don't trouble much, bread and coffee if you've got it." She looked at me a moment with something in her face I took at the time for figuring the price, and only understood later was the opposite. Then she went to the cupboard, and I watched her open it, and I have not forgotten what was in it because there was so little. A twist of coffee, a sack of beans gone low, a crock of grease, and 1 loaf of bread, the heel of it already cut, set by careful on a cloth. She took down that loaf, and she cut it, not a slice, the most of what was left, and she set it to toast on the stove top with a smear of the grease, and she put the coffee on, and while it cooked she ladled out a bowl of beans that had been keeping warm in a pot at the back of the stove, the family's supper, and she set it in front of me. "Ma'am," I said, "the boy." "Davy's had his," she said, and the boy looked at the beans and looked away quick, the way a hungry child does when he's been raised not to say so, and I knew she was lying, and I knew it for the kind of lie that costs. I'm a hard man. I told you that. I have sat across a table from men trying to ruin me and felt nothing but a cold interest in how they'd go about it. I have buried what I had to bury and ridden out the next morning dry-eyed because cattle don't keep for grief. And I sat in that warm, low room with the storm trying to tear the roof off, and a woman who had one loaf of bread in the world set the most of it in front of a stranger she'd taken for a saddle tramp, and called it nothing, and I had to look hard at the stove for a while before I trusted my voice. "I thank you," I said. "It's only beans," she said. It was not only beans. I have eaten at the tables of men who counted their cattle in the tens of thousands, on china that cost more than that station was worth, and I have never since had a meal I was so glad of. I ate slow to make it last and to leave what I could, and when she wasn't watching I broke off a good half of that toasted bread and held it down low by my knee, and the boy Davy crept over an inch at a time, and I put it in his hand without a word, and he ate it under the table where his mother wouldn't see, fast like a pup. She saw. She didn't say anything. Her chin went up and her eyes went bright, and she turned to the coffee so I wouldn't watch her face do what it was doing. When I'd eaten she let me lay my bedroll by the stove, and she carried the lamp to the window and turned the wick up, not down, and set it on the sill where the storm could see it. "You'll burn your oil for nothing in this," I said. "Nobody's on the road tonight." "My husband always kept a light in the window," she said, "for anyone caught out. He said you never know who's coming." She looked at the dark glass and the white beyond it. "I keep it. It's a small thing to keep." "Where's your husband now, ma'am?" "In the ground out back of the barn," she said, plain, the way you say a thing you've worn smooth from saying. "A year this past spring. The fever." She tucked the boy into a cot in the corner and sat by him until his breathing went deep. Then she sat by the stove with her mending, working by the same lamp she'd be wise to save, and I lay watching the fire and pretending to sleep and doing what I had not done in longer than I'll admit. I lay there feeling ashamed. Her name was Hannah Reese. The boy was Davy. The dead man under the cold ground was Tom Reese, who had bought the Hollow Spring Station 8 years back when the Bellamy Road was the only way wagons came up to the mining camps north of Monroe, and who had made a fair living off teamsters and stage passengers and drovers needing a meal and a bed and a change of team, until the new road went through. I learned all this in pieces over the days that followed, because the storm did not blow out that night, nor the next, nor the next. It settled in over the high plains the way bad luck settles into a place, and for the better part of a week I was snowed fast at Hollow Spring with a woman too proud to take a stranger's coin and a boy too hungry to refuse one's bread. I have to tell it slow here because it was slow. The fast part of my life, the buying and the selling, the writing, the deals struck in the time it takes to shake a hand, all of it stopped at that door. Inside it the days were long and small, and in the long smallness of them I came to know the shape of what was killing her, and it was not the snow. The second day I went out between gusts and found the barn roof had a hole in it where a beam had gone soft, and the snow was drifting onto her hay. So I mended it. I'm a cattleman. I've thrown more roofs and dug more post holes than I could count, and my hands knew the work though they'd got soft sitting on the backs of horses giving orders. She came out and found me up there hammering with her dead husband's tools, and she stood in the snow looking up at me with her arms crossed. "You don't have to do that." "Roof's got a hole," I said. "I'm dry up here and idle. Man ought to be one or the other, not both." She watched a while. Then she said low, "Tom was going to fix that," and went back in. Tom was going to fix a great many things. I found the list of them in the bones of the place over those days. The pump that wanted a new leather and gave her 10 strokes for a cup of water, the corral rail down, The door that didn't seat and let the cold finger in along the floor. The second chimney she'd capped to save the cost of keeping 2 fires. A man's unfinished work, frozen the day he died, and a woman keeping the rest of it alive alone by main strength. I fixed what I could reach. She fought me on every piece of it and let me do every piece, and I understood that too after a day or so. It wasn't pride that I was a stranger. It was that letting a thing be done for her was admitting it needed doing, and admitting that was the first crack in the wall she was holding up with her own back. I knew about walls like that. I'd built a taller one. The boy thawed faster than his mother. By the 3rd day, Davy was my shadow. He held nails. He fetched the hammer when I dropped it and pretended to be strong carrying the toolbox that he could barely lift, and I let him think he was strong, because that's a thing a boy needs to be let think. He talked the way the snowbound talk, all at once after the dam breaks. He told me his pa was the best stage driver on the whole Bellamy Road and could turn a 6 up in a yard the size of a handkerchief. He told me the new road was a sneak and a cheat and had stoled all their wagons. He told me his ma cried sometimes when she thought he was asleep, but he wasn't always asleep. He told me that, matter of fact, the way children hand you a knife by the blade, not knowing. And he told me about the tin. It was a tobacco tin he kept behind the wood box, and in it was his fortune, which he counted most every night, and which came to $1.40, all in pennies and a few hard-earned dimes, saved up over the better part of a year from doing for the few travelers who still came. Holding a horse, running a message into Monroe, splitting kindling for the stage that came through but the once a week now. $1.40. And it was going toward, he told me in a whisper like it was the holiest secret on earth, a pony. There's a man in Monroe, he breathed. Got a paint pony, a real one, a little one just my size, and he wants $4 for it. And when I get $4, I'm going to buy it, and then I can help ma carry messages faster, and I can be a drover when I'm growed, and we won't be poor no more. $4. He had $1.40, and he was 6, and he counted it by the lamp like a banker, and he believed in it the way you can only believe in something when you are 6, and you have decided the world is going to be fair. I had $4 on me. I had $4 in my boot I'd forgotten about. I could have handed him that pony 100 times over and never felt it, and every grown thing in me wanted to. I didn't. I want that set down plain because it was the first wise thing I'd done in years and I didn't even know why I was doing it at the time. Something stopped my hand. Maybe it was watching his mother. A child who is handed the world learns the world is a thing that gets handed to him. I'd been handed mine once, young, and then it had been taken back all at once, and I'd spent 30 years deciding nothing would ever be handed to me again. I'd take it with both fists and oh no man. That's a cold way to grow, I can tell you, but there's a colder. There's the boy who learns that wanting is enough, that the tin doesn't have to fill because some big hand will always tip in the rest. I looked at that fierce little fellow guarding his $1.40 and I thought, not him. He'll have his pony, but he'll have it because he earned the one of it down to the last penny, and that pony will be more his than any horse in my whole remuda is mine. So I shut my hand on the $4 in my boot and I said, $1.40's a good start. Drovers save. That's the first thing about being a drover. He looked at me like I'd handed him a commandment off a mountain. Did you ever save up for something? Once, I said, a long time ago. And I did not tell him it had been a wife and a house and a future, and that I'd had it, and that the fever, the same kind that took his pa, had taken it off me in a single black week when I was younger than his mother was now, and that I'd never let myself save up for anything that could be taken since. I just said, once, and let him think it was a saddle. His mother heard the end of that. She was always nearer than you thought, that woman, moving so quiet on her work. That night, after the boy slept, she sat by the lamp and she said, not looking up from her mending, "You're good with him. He's an easy boy to be good with. He hasn't had a man pay him mind in a year." Her needle stopped. "I don't know your name. I never asked. That was poor manners. Only I figured a man riding in a storm has his reasons for whatever name he gives, and it wasn't mine to dig at. It was the nearest she'd come to asking, and I sat there with the lie-ready Wade, just Wade, a drover between outfits, nobody, and I found I couldn't quite say the whole of it to her, so I gave her the half. "Wade," I said. "Wade Coker." "Hannah Reese." She said it like a handshake. "You're not a saddle tramp, Mr. Coker. You've got a tramp's coat and a rich man's hands. I noticed the first night. A man whose hands are soft as that doesn't ride a horse like yours through a storm to nowhere unless he's got somewhere very particular he's hiding from or running to." She looked at me then, straight on, the way she'd looked at the dark window. "I'm not asking which. I'm only telling you I'm not a fool in case you decided I was." I had not met many people in my life who could see clean through me, and fewer I was glad to be seen through by. "No, ma'am," I said. "I never decided that." "Good," she said, and went back to her mending, and I understood I'd been weighed and for some reason past my deserving kept. So I'll tell you about the trouble, because the trouble had a name, and the name came up the road behind a fast team the morning the snow finally broke. His name was Easterhouse. He was a land agent out of Monroe, a soft, heavy man in a good coat who drove a cutter with 2 matched bays that were worth more than everything Hannah Reese owned, and he came up the cleared road the first morning it was passable with a leather folder under his arm and a smile he'd practiced. I was in the barn when he came. I stayed in the barn. A man in a tramp's coat learns more from a barn than a parlor. I heard most of it through the wall. He was sorry to call so soon after the weather. He was sorry to press. But the note Tom Reese had signed against the station, for the new well for the bad year, for the doctor at the end who couldn't save him anyway, that note had passed to interests Mr. Easterhouse represented, and it was coming due, and the interests Mr. Easterhouse represented were prepared to be generous. They'd take the deed clear, forgive the balance, and give Mrs. Reese a little besides to start fresh somewhere a woman alone could manage. A town, say. A respectable position. This was no place for her, surely she saw that. A dead road. No traffic in a year. A boy to raise. Be reasonable, Mrs. Reese. It was a kindness he was offering, really, when you looked at it square. And I heard her say no. I heard her say it the first time soft and the second time not soft, and I heard him keep on patient, the way water keeps on at a stone, telling her the figures, telling her there was no choice in it really. The note was the note. By spring it would be the law's affair and not his, and the law wasn't kind. He was kind. Take the kindness, Mrs. Reese. And I heard her voice go thin and tight, holding the wall up with her back, and I came near to walking in there and ending it with who I was. I had the note's holder by then. I could guess it. 3 men in that whole territory bought up paper like that, and I knew all 3, and any one of them would have torn that note up and apologized for owning it if Wade Coker had asked him to over a cigar. I had it in my power to make Easterhouse and his soft coat disappear off her step like a bad smell. I didn't, same as the pony. Something stopped my hand, and this time I knew what it was, because she'd taught it to me at her own cupboard the first night. If I walked in there as the rich man and waved it away, it would be a thing handed to her. And the one true thing she had left, the thing she was holding that wall up to keep, was that nothing about Hollow Spring had been handed to her. She'd earned every cold inch of it, and she'd lose it on her feet before she'd be saved sitting down. To save her like that would be to take the last of it. So I waited, and when Easterhouse finally drove off, "I'll call again, Mrs. Reese. Do think on it. The offer won't stand forever." I came in from the barn and found her standing at the window with the boy's tin in her 2 hands, not even knowing she'd picked it up, just holding the weight of his $1.40 like it could anchor her to the floor. "How long?" I asked. She didn't pretend not to know what I meant. "1st of April, then it's the courts." She set the tin down very careful. "I've got till spring to find the balance or sell to him or be put off. I can't find the balance. There's no traffic to find it from. He knows that. That's why he can afford to be kind." "How much is the note?" She told me. It was a sum that would close a place like this and not be missed out of a herd like mine. It was a sum she could no more raise off a dead road than she could raise the dead man under it. "Why won't you take his offer?" I asked her. I asked it honest because I wanted to hear her say the thing I'd guessed, to know if it was real or just my wanting it to be. "He's not wrong that it's hard out here alone. A town'd be easier. The boy'd be schooled." She looked at me a long moment. Then she went and stood by the cot where Davy was sleeping off his stew, and she put her hand on his hair. "My husband is in the ground out that wall," she said. "He's the only thing in the world that's mine that no one can take. I'd be leaving him to strangers. And this," she made a small motion that took in the low room, the stove, the window, the leaning barn, the whole hard small kingdom of it, "this is the only thing Davy's ever going to have that his father built. Easterhouse'd give me money for it. He can't give me that. Nobody can buy that and nobody can sell it. And the day I take his coin for it is the day I tell my boy that the things you love are worth what a soft man in a cutter says they're worth." Her hand tightened in the boy's hair, gentle. "I'd rather be put off it with nothing. At least then I never sold it. There's a difference, Mr. Coker, between losing a thing and selling it. I'd like my son to know there's a difference. I have done a great deal of business in my life. I have, God forgive me, been the soft man in the warm coat explaining the figures to people standing on the last of their ground. I have called it kindness, and I stood in that room and was more ashamed than the bread had made me, and more sure of one thing than I'd been of anything in 30 years. The snow was passable. My week was up. By every rule of the part I was playing I should have saddled Cobb at first light and ridden on, back to my own life, to the foreman and the herds and the cold tall wall I'd built and called a self. I went out to the barn that next morning to do exactly that. I saddled the horse. I led him to the door. The boy came running out in his nightshirt and bare feet in the snow to see, and his face when he understood I was leaving. He didn't cry. He was too proud. He'd learned it off his mother, but his chin did the thing hers did. And Hannah came to the door behind him with the shawl over her shoulders and didn't say a word, just stood, because she'd weighed me right the first night, and she knew you don't ask a man like that to stay. You only let him see clear what he'd be leaving. I stood there with the reins in my soft, rich hand, and I thought about the lamp she put in the window every night for whoever was coming, burning oil she couldn't spare on the chance that someone was out there in the cold who needed to see a light. And I thought, I was the one who was out there. For 30 years I was the one in the cold who couldn't see a light, and here was the lamp. I led Cobb back into the stall and unsaddled him. "I'll stay on a while if you've work," I said to her, not meeting her eye gruff as I could make it, because a man's got to keep some wall. Drovers between outfits do that. Work for board, it's nothing. It was not nothing. She knew it was not nothing. She said, "There's plenty of work," in a voice that wasn't quite steady, and went in to put the coffee on, and the boy whooped and grabbed my hand and I let him. I stayed 3 more weeks. I told myself it was the snow, and then I told myself it was the work, and then I quit telling myself anything. I mended the corral and recapped the second chimney so she could keep 2 fires and the cold quit fingering along the floor. I broke the sway-backed mule to a lighter harness so the boy could drive it on errands. I taught Davy to throw a rope at a fence post, and to curry a horse proper, and to save his pennies, and one cold, bright afternoon I taught him to set a horseshoe nail without splitting the hoof, and he glowed for 2 days. And in the long evenings I sat across the lamp from Hannah Reese, and we talked the way you talk when the days are small and the nights are long and there's nowhere on earth to be but here. About Tom, who she let me know without ever quite saying it she had loved well and grieved honest and was done grieving. About my own dead, who I told her about for the first time in 30 years, a sentence at a time, and found the telling didn't kill me. About the boy. About the spring coming, and the note coming with it, the shadow neither of us named but both of us felt lengthening across the floor as the days got longer. I knew by the second week that I loved her. I'm not a man given to the word, and I'll not waste it now. I loved the straight back of her and the lies she'd told over the beans, and the lamp she burned for strangers, and the wall she held up, and the gentleness she had left over for her boy after a day that would have flattened a strong man. I loved that she'd seen through me the first night and kept me anyway. And I knew just as sure that I couldn't say a word of it because I was still wearing the tramp's coat and the borrowed name, and a man does not court a woman in a disguise. The day I told her who I was, Wade Coker, who any soul north of the territory line would name you in a breath, who could buy her note and her road and her whole horizon and not feel the spend of it, that day everything between us would change its weight. She'd taken in a saddle tramp. She would not so easy take a debt. And there was Easterhouse's note coming due, and the worst thing I could imagine was her ever, for one moment, thinking I'd stayed to be her rescue, or that the loaf she'd given a poor man had been a coin paid down on a rich one. So I did the only thing I could think to do that was both honest and hidden. The last week of March, I told her I had to ride to Monroe for harness leather. I rode to Monroe, and in Monroe I stopped being a saddle tramp. I'll tell that part quick, because it happened quick. I went to the freight company that had built the new road, the one that had killed hers, and I sat across a desk from its manager in my tramp's coat and watched his face change as I told him my name, and then I told him what I wanted. My fall drive, 1,100 head, had been going down the new road to the railhead 2 years running. I told him it was going down the Bellamy Road this year and every year after, and that I'd want it provisioned and staged the old way, with a station midway to change teams and feed men and hold stock. I told him I'd want the mail contract for the upper camps rerouted, that I'd pay to have the Bellamy Road graded and the bridges seen to, and that there was a station at Hollow Spring I'd warrant could victual and bed a crew, run by a Mrs. Reese, and that any teamster of mine, any drover, any soul on my payroll passing that way would stop there and pay fare and tip farer, and that this was not a request. A man with 1,100 head and the cash behind them does not make requests, he makes weather. By the time I left that office, the Bellamy Road had a future again, and not one word of it had my name on it where she could find it. Then I went to the bank and I found Easterhouse's interests. It was old Pell, just as I'd guessed, who owed me favors going back a decade, and I did the one thing I'd sworn I wouldn't because there's wisdom and then there's pride dressed up as wisdom. I decided I wouldn't hand her the note paid, so I didn't. I bought it. I bought the paper outright, the whole balance, so that it passed out of Easterhouse's soft hands and into mine, and then I sat down and wrote in my own hand terms she could meet. The note carried 5 more years at no interest, payable out of the station's own takings, the deed to stay in the name of Hannah Reese, sole. The agent Easterhouse barred from the matter entire. Not forgiven, not given. Earned on terms a working station with a live road under it could pay off honest, with the work of her own 2 hands. I had Pell's Bank set to send it as the bank's own offer, a revised note, the road's revival having improved the security, regular as rain, so that it would reach her with no man's name on it but the bank's, the way good fortune is supposed to come, looking like luck and not like rescue. And the last thing I did in Monroe, I confess, I did for myself and for a 6-year-old's tin. I found the man with the paint pony. I did not buy the pony. I paid the man $2.60, the exact difference between $1.40 and $4, to come out to Hollow Spring the 2nd week of April and offer that boy steady work. Errands run, the pony's own keep earned, holding stock when my drovers came through, at wages that would let Davy count out $4 hard-earned dollars into that man's hand by midsummer and lead the pony home himself, having bought it, so that nothing was handed to him. So that the want stayed his all the way down to the last penny, and the having was his own doing. That cost me $2.60 and was the best money I have spent in my life, and I have spent a great deal of it on a great many things. Then I rode back to Hollow Spring in my tramp's coat to say goodbye properly and ride out before any of it arrived, because I still believed, fool that I was, that the wise and the decent thing was to set all of it in motion and then vanish, and let her good fortune look like fortune, and never let her know the saddle tramp had been the weather behind it. I didn't get the chance. She was at the door when I rode up, in the long gold light of a March evening with the snow gone soft and dripping off the eaves and the first smell of mud and growing things in the air, and she had a letter in her hand. The bank's letter. It had come on the very stage I'd ridden ahead of without knowing it. She stood there reading it again as I rode up, and when she looked at me her face was a thing I'd not seen on her, open, undefended, the wall down, and underneath the wall, plain as the boys, was hope she'd been too long afraid to feel. "They've revised the note," she said. "The bank. The road's coming back, they say. The freight, a cattle outfit's putting their whole drive up the Bellamy Road. Can you feature it? And they say it makes the place worth carrying, and they've—" Her voice broke and steadied. "5 years, no interest, payable out of the takings, and the deed stays mine. Mine. Easterhouse is out of it. I read it 4 times. It's real. Mr. Coker, it's real. I'm not going to lose it." And then she stopped. I watched her stop. I watched her look at me, at the tramp's coat and the rich man's hands, and I watched her remember every wall I'd kept and every question she hadn't asked, and I watched her be the woman who'd seen clean through me the first night, and was nobody's fool, and could read a thing handed to her looking like luck for exactly what it was. The letter came down slow to her side. "A cattle outfit," she said, quiet now, "putting their whole drive up a dead road. 1,100 head, the bank says, up a road that hasn't seen 11 head in a year." She looked at me. "What's your outfit, Mr. Coker?" I could have lied. I was good at it. I'd been doing it all month. I looked at her standing in the gold light with the deed to her dead husband's dream safe in her hand and her boy's pony halfway bought and the whole hard kingdom of Hollow Spring saved, and I found I had no lie left in me anywhere. The wall was just gone. I don't know where walls go. "Coker," I said, "the Coker outfit. It's mine, Hannah. The cattle, the drive, the road. I rode in here a month ago in a poor man's coat to take the measure of a country that had been cold to me my whole life, and I found out the country was cold because I'd never once knocked on the right door. And then a woman with 1 loaf of bread in the world gave me the most of it and lied and said it was nothing. My voice did the thing hers always did. I let it. It was not nothing. I've been a rich man 20 years and nobody ever gave me a single thing till you gave me that bread because I never let them, and I'd flat forgot there was anything in this world a man couldn't take or buy. You wouldn't sell your road for a soft man's coin. You'd lose it standing up first. I heard you say it through the barn wall, and I have not been the same man since. I got down off the horse so I wasn't above her. So I didn't buy you a way out. I won't insult you with one. I bought the road a future it'll have to be worked for, and a note you'll pay off your own self out of your own takings with your own 2 hands, and the deed's yours alone and always will be. And if you told me to ride on, I'd have ridden on and you'd never have known my name. But you asked. And I find I can't lie to you. I never could the first night. That's why I gave you half my name and not the whole. It was the most lie I could manage to your face." She was quiet a long time. The light went from gold to rose along the soft snow. Somewhere behind the house the boy was throwing his rope at a fence post the way I'd taught him, and missing, and trying again, the small whap of it coming steady through the evening. "The pony," she said finally. "Davy said a man's coming to give him work, real wages, so he can buy it himself." That part I did do for myself, I admitted. I couldn't stand to hand it to him, and I couldn't stand for him not to have it, so I bought him the chance to earn it. That's all I bought him. The earning's his. And Hannah Reese put her hand over her mouth and made a sound that was half a sob and half a laugh, and she said from behind her hand, "You impossible man. You'd move a whole cattle drive 40 miles and grade a road and rewrite a bank's note, and you wouldn't buy a 6-year-old a $2 pony because," she was crying now and laughing, "because you understood. You actually understood." She took her hand down. "Do you know how long it's been since anyone understood?" "About as long as it's been for me," I said. "We could maybe shorten it for each other." She came down the step. She stood close, and she looked up at me with the wall down and stayed down, and she said, "I gave you that bread because you were cold and you knocked, and that's all the reason anybody needs. I'd have done it for any soul in that storm. I didn't do it because of who you were." I know, I said. That's the whole of why I love you. You'd have done it for any soul in the storm. Do you think I'd have let you near my road and my drive and the rest of my life if you'd done it because of who I was? You can't love a woman in a week and a half, Mr. Coker. No, I agreed. It took me about a day and a half. The rest of the week I spent fighting it. And she laughed again, the wet, helpless laugh, and I put my soft, rich, foolish hand against her cheek, careful, the way you'd touch something you'd decided never to risk loving again, and she let me. And after a while she put her own cracked, hard hand up over mine and held it there. I'll draw the curtain on the rest of that evening the way she'd want me to, the way the man telling this would want for her. I'll only say that when the boy came around the house at full run, having finally roped the post and needing the whole world to know it, he found his mother and the saddle tramp standing close in the last light, and being 6, and having decided the world was going to be fair, he found nothing in it to wonder at. He just hollered, "I got it." I roped him clean. And we both told him he was the finest hand on the Bellamy Road, and meant it. Come spring the road came back. I promised it would, and a Coker keeps his word. That's the one thing about me that was never a disguise. The graders came through in April, and the bridges were seen to, and the first freight wagons crowned the rise above Hollow Spring the second week of the month, a whole string of them, and pulled into her yard to change teams and buy a meal, her meal, that she charged a fair price for, and they paid glad, because there was no other table for 40 miles and hers was the best of them. By May the drovers were coming, my drovers, ahead of the herds, and they ate at Hannah Reese's long table and slept in her mendied barn and paid her honest and tipped her fair because I'd warranted they would, and because, once they'd eaten there, they wanted to. The takings came in. She made the first payment on the note out of her own hand into the bank, against the paper I held and never told her I held. That's a secret a man's allowed to keep, the one that costs him and not her, and I watched her sign the receipt with her chin up, owing no man, paying her own way, saving her own road. And I have rarely been so proud of anything in my life, and never of anything I did myself. The pony came home in July. Davy earned the $4 over 10 weeks of hard small labor, holding stock and running messages and splitting kindling for the crews, and he counted it out into the ponyman's hand himself, every penny, the $1.40 from the tin and $2.60 in new-earned wages, and he led that little paint home up the Bellamy Road at a walk with his back straight as his mother's, the richest boy in the territory, having bought the thing himself. I bought 100 ponies in my life and gave away a dozen, and not one of them was ever owned the way that boy owned that one. He named it Coffee, for no reason a grown man could follow. It's an old fat thing now, and it follows him still. And the wagons crowded her road. That's the part the title of this would have you wait for, and it's true, and I'll give it to you plain. By that first autumn there was a line of them most mornings, freight and stage and drovers and the mail for the upper camps, all of them stopping at the light Hannah Reese had kept burning in her window through a whole dead year for nobody, burning it on the chance that someone was out there in the cold who needed to see it. There'd been someone. It had been me. And when the road came back, every wagon on it came past her window, and the light she'd kept for strangers became a light a whole country steered by. We married in the fall in Monroe Plain, the way she wanted, and she kept her own name on the deed because I'd not have had it any other way, and neither would she. And Hollow Spring stayed hers, Tom Reese's last good thing kept alive and passed whole to his son. And I learned to live in a warm, low room with a stove and a lamp in the window and a boy who called me, after a careful while, by a name that wasn't Pa and wasn't Mister, and was something we worked out between us that suited us both. I kept the cattle and the road and the rest of it, but the home was hers, built out of one shared loaf and a stubborn light, and she let me live in it, which is the truest thing anyone ever gave me, and the only fortune I ever had that I didn't take with both fists but was handed freely by a woman who'd have done it for any soul in the storm. I was a hard man once. I had $90,000 in cattle and not a soul on earth who'd have wept if I'd frozen. I rode in Plain to learn what a country was made of, and I found out at a cupboard with one loaf of bread in it, and what it was made of was her. I keep the lamp in the window now. We both do. You never know who's coming. She taught me that. It's a small thing to keep.